horizon for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. But we have two candidates right now. So we have Kevin Robson and Maria Mclaughlin. And we know that these folks have been in the news a lot, not only, on our TV screens for their campaign ads, but the fact that this Pennsylvania Supreme Court race is ramping up to be one of the most expensive in history. We have millions of dollars being spent on this Pennsylvania Supreme Court race. Now, this race isn't going to tip the balance of who controls the Supreme Court. We're currently 5-2. It's 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans currently sitting on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So it's not going to tip the balance in that way in this one race, but it could have some ramifications for the future as we go down the line and we have others who will be aging out of the Supreme Court and opportunities for the complexion of the court to change. So we're looking forward to this Pennsylvania Supreme Court race. I can say that, there have been ads across, I'm in the Philadelphia market, right? I live in Chester County, so I'm in the Philadelphia market. And I can tell you that across my TV screen, I've seen ads that were appearing that were misleading and untrue. We've had those happen before, and we've had the Pennsylvania Bar Association strike those down and actually change someone's rating from recommended or highly recommended to not recommended based upon that. And we know that they're not going to do that this time around because we're so close to the election. So they don't want to sway the election in any way by changing ratings for the Bar Association. But, shame on someone who we're going to have faith and trust in to disperse justice, who was running ads that were untrue, which had to come down and then change. So that's kind of where we are here with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court race. It's not going to change, who controls the Supreme Court anyway, being that it's currently 5-2. But this is a very important race, and we know that the type of, cases that come out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, from our voting rights to reproductive justice and more. So very important. And while we are still only one of a handful of states in the entire country who gets to vote for our judges, including our appellate judges, it's so important that we inform ourselves and make the appropriate decision tomorrow before 8:00 p.m.
Thank you, Khadija. And so, Katie, give us some of the things that you have uncovered from your months of reporting of covering this race.
Well, so the Supreme Court race specifically, I would say of the appellate court races, no surprise, this has been the most contentious one. And Khadija, I think this is what she was referring to, but we did have a situation pretty recently where Kevin Robson, the Republican running for Supreme Court, was running ads disparaging, among other things, the record that Maria Mclaughlin had as a judge. And what they had said was, that she basically let off a drunk driver who had killed a pregnant woman in a car accident. It wasn't true. Basically, what had happened was she advised a retrial. She had ruled that the judge or the lawyer in the case, the attorney in the case, had messed up. And that was just her joining the opinion of another judge and making that ruling. She's on the Superior Court right now. He's on the Commonwealth Court. So it was sort of a rare situation where the Bar Association jumped in and said, you need to pull this back. Robson's campaign said that they were being nitpicky and said that it was not a reasonable request for them to make. They did tweak the ads slightly to add some context, but they mostly kept the content of it up. I actually talked with Maria Mclaughlin today. She's still not pleased about the fact that this happened. But these ads, they ran in the Harrisburg, Philadelphia, and I believe also in the Allegheny County media markets. So they're out there. They're TV ads, which are not as powerful, I think, for influencing voters as maybe they once were, but they still, make a difference, especially in races like these. So that's significant. So yeah, I would say in the Supreme Court, again, as you mentioned, it's not going to change the balance of the court, but I think it's important to remember that these are 10-year terms. And once judges are on the bench, until they get too old to serve on the court, they very rarely lose an election, because after the 10-year term, what you get is a retention election, which is just yes or no. And so it's not a lifetime appointment, but in many cases, it might as well be.
Thanks for that. And Stephen, I know you've recently been covering just the amount of money, the share of dollars that have been coming into that race. You talk a little bit about that and anything other of note that you pulled from your reporting and covering the Supreme Court race.
Yeah, so we've seen about, just in terms of money given to Robson Mclaughlin, about $5 million has been spent on this one race, and that's a lot of money. I mean, that is, especially for a court race. I think we saw about 15 million spent on 3 seats up about 6 years ago. So like we're at like a pretty record pacing clip for one seat that won't flip the outcome. And what we're stats from, a lot of that money for on the conservative side is coming from this guy named Jeff Yass. He is he's one of the richest men in Pennsylvania. He is a billionaire, and he puts millions of dollars into funding school choice efforts to try and expand charter schools and private school access. And then on the Democratic side, you have trial lawyers, their association, Philadelphia, and labor unions, particularly trade unions, carpenters, steam fitters, those types. They've been spending a lot of money. And I think all that money should just kind of tell people that, like, this is important. People with power think this race is important for a reason, even though it won't flip the outcome, because the state Supreme Court, I mean, they've struck down the congressional maps as an unconstitutional gerrymander. They had a lot to do with the election last year. They gave people's ballots 3 extra days to show up due to postal delays. For Pittsburghers, if you have paid sick leave, that the only reason that law went into effect, the state Supreme Court said it was legal. That's I think it was about 2 years ago. So this is like a really, really important seat, and even if it won't flip the outcome, like, state Supreme Court arguably, can be at times more powerful than even your state legislators. So definitely vote in this election if you care.
Miracle.
And sticking with you, Stephen, on reverse order, you talked a lot about, the outside money coming in. What are some of not the predictors, but what are some of the focal points that you're also seeing in Pennsylvania? We know that there is also these appellate judge races as well. Are they getting some of the same investment?
Yeah, I mean, we're also seeing money spent on some of the lower candidates. Jeff Yass, he is a prolific spender. Katie, I think, has covered some of his movement and how he moves money around. But Commonwealth Court, which is one below Supreme Court, Superior Court, which is also below. All these races are big money races these days because the candidates that you see on your ballot, Commonwealth and Superior, they could get elected. Anything they do could be overturned by the Supreme Court, but you might in 2, 4, 5, 6 years see these same names again running for Supreme Court. They're kind of like a farm team for politicos. So yeah, like the trade unions, Jeff Yass's money coming through a multitude of different venues. Like all of them are spending big business interests through the Chamber of Commerce, and those ever-present Philadelphia trial lawyers. All of them are putting money into this because they want to have a return on their investment, not just in potentially picking up a seat this year, but also on those lower courts, getting someone who they think will be palatable, maybe run in 3, 4, 5 years when they could flip control of the court, at least for Republicans.
I'll also just jump in. One of the interesting candidates running on the Commonwealth Court is a Republican, Drew Crompton. He worked for decades for the Senate Republicans, specifically for Joe Scarnati, who's the now ex-Senate President pro tem. And one just interesting note on the spending is that Scarnati, who now is basically a lobbyist, has put a bunch of money into Crompton's campaign. And, that's fine. It's totally allowed. It's just you can see these political relationships coming to fruition in these judicial races. I should also say, just, as a note, because I think it's important to understand like why Pennsylvania runs its elections like this. The judicial races do have different rules than like a legislative election. Judges are supposed to basically do everything through their campaign, so they can't solicit donations themselves. Or they're not supposed to anyway. They can't promise to rule a certain way. But, again, this does put them in a really weird position where they're not supposed to be a political actor once they're on the bench. However, they are in a position where they need to ally themselves with a party and then campaign actively in now very, very expensive elections across the state. And so it's a quasi-political job. And you see that in the way that people treat judges in Pennsylvania. It's considered a partisan position now. And that's not totally a function of the way that we run the elections, but it's part of it.
And if I can jump in here and speak for the people of Pennsylvania, we don't have Jeff Yass's money, right? The individuals here who we out here casting their ballots tomorrow before 8:00 p.m. We don't have Jeff Yes's money. And so we cannot influence or try to influence the court in the same way in which he can, which makes this very unfair for we, the people out here who are trying to do the right thing, pay attention to what it is these judges will bring to the bench so that we can elect the appropriate people who as we vote our values. So, if we talk about having an independent judiciary, right, we know we're going back to grade school civics. We know that we're supposed to have separate and co-equal branches of government. And we have situations here in the Commonwealth where we have a legislative branch who is trying to usurp their authority over the judicial branch and otherwise. And so it's just really important for us to recognize that there are others that are out here who have the money to try to influence these judicial races, and then hopefully influence it on their behalf. You think about the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce, how they would benefit by particular rulings by appellate court judges. And so it's just the little guy out here. We just need to make sure that we're actually having our voices heard, and we can do that at the ballot box. Well, we may not have the money to drop millions. We can voice our power at the ballot box if we come together and come out in record numbers for this judicial race.
And just, I jump in really quick.
Yes.
On all of this, like, if you're kind of hearing us talk about money spent, if you're hearing millions of dollars on politics, this is another reminder. Pennsylvania has no campaign finance limits on statewide races. So if I had millions of dollars and I wanted to write someone literally a $20 million check and say, here, run for governor for me, or, that's illegal. That is completely legal in this state. So just another heads up if you're kind of mind boggled by the amount of money that's spent on politics in the state.
No, thank you for that. That's a great point. So looking at, the two appellate courts below Supreme, starting with Superior Court, and I'll just open this up, to the group, whoever wants to jump in first. Could you talk a little bit about what the Superior Court is and who are the two candidates running, and what makes them different? What is the distinction?
Start off. So, again, Pennsylvania, it's actually pretty unusual because we have 3 different appellate courts. Most states only have 2. The Supreme, obviously, it's the court of last resort. The Commonwealth specifically does cases that are related to the state in most cases. So like if we have a question of whether a law is legal, that'll go to the Commonwealth Court. The Superior, it's often like criminal cases. It's cases that rise up through the ranks of being, appealed and appealed and appealed. And that'll be, if you and me have a case that becomes very contentious, it might end up in the Superior Court. So that's, it's kind of, that's the different one among the 3, I would say. The Superior Court, like the Supreme Court, it has 2 seats open. And the Democrat running in that case is Tamika Lane. She is a common pleas judge in Philadelphia, and I'm blanking on the Republican's name.
Megan Sullivan.
Megan Sullivan, and she was a Chester County DA, I want to say, and then she also worked for the Attorney General for a while, statewide. So again, that's gotten a little bit less attention, but an important race. Right now, the Superior Court has a pretty even split of Democrats and Republicans. So it's a little bit, the judges don't make solo decisions, and they don't rule as an entire bench on the Superior Court. They'll kind of enter into these decisions as a group of 1 or 2 judges usually. But the partisanship, I think people would argue it might make a difference. And yeah, those are your 2 candidates.
Yeah, one of the most famous cases that the Superior Court has handled in recent years was they threw out the Meek Mill's probation case, and that's kind of been been a calling card for a lot of people when they're talking about why is probation broken in Pennsylvania. The Superior Court said, well, this entire case is it just doesn't work, and tossed it. So that's been one of the most biggest things I think a lot of people know of that they've handled in recent years.
And either way this comes out, the Superior Court race, we're going to have another woman added to the bench. Pennsylvania does a great job of electing women to our appellate courts. What we don't do such a great job of doing for our appellate courts is electing women of color. As we have 31 judges to sit on the appellate courts, we have 1 of 31 of those judges being a person of color, Judge Carolyn Nichols, being the only one. And so here's an opportunity to have some representative elected, elected officials who represent the demographics of the Commonwealth in this particular opportunity. Knowing, and then also Tamika Lane is the only judge currently running the candidate in this race. Megan Sullivan is not currently a judge for this appellate court seat.
And moving to the Commonwealth Court, we'll start with Stephen. Talk a little bit about the Commonwealth Court race, and as Katie, laid out, the Commonwealth Court is a unique court to the state of Pennsylvania. It deals with state issues, school board stuff, which obviously is very important right now, which we'll get into a little bit. The voting, I know a number of times when I was doing advocacy around the voter ID laws 10, 12 years ago, there was, over the last decade, there's been decisions in Commonwealth Court as well around some of those issues of voting rights. But you could talk a little bit about what the Commonwealth Court is, as well as some of the candidates running. We'll go Stephen, Khadija, then back to Katie about the Commonwealth Court race.
Yeah, so basically, if you want to sue a state agency, if you want to sue a public utility, not utility, but like basically a lot of public groups, that case is going to start in Commonwealth Court. It is, I believe, currently judges elected as Republicans make up a majority. So voting rights, they are the court that tossed Pennsylvania's voter ID law originally back in 2012-ish, I want to say that was, and all the lawsuits, at least in state courts, that were filed over the 2020 election, a lot of them started in Commonwealth Court. Like if someone challenges an election result, if someone challenges an election law, that's going to start in Commonwealth Court. School mask laws, there are lawsuits over that; those are starting in Commonwealth Court. I say start because anything that Commonwealth Court rules could be appealed up to the Supremes, which is why there's so much. You're seeing so many ads for that race, but if sometimes their rulings hold. There was a really big lawsuit that against the city of Harrisburg about its ability to kind of pass and maintain gun laws that are stricter than the states. Commonwealth Court ruled that those lawsuits could continue. Basically it's the technical legal reasons, but they said this is a good lawsuit, and the Supreme Court upheld that. All these courts matter, but yeah, Commonwealth Court is that sort of place where if you are challenging the government or a city or any sort of like public agency, it's going to start most likely there.
There's another important case that was heard by the Commonwealth Court most recently, and that is the one that challenges Marcy's Law. So if those of us who voted back in 2019 remember, there was Marcy's Law on as a ballot referendum question, and we know here in Pennsylvania that's what we do. We say yes on ballot referendum questions, and so we did, as Pennsylvanians, say yes in numbers to that. It was the Commonwealth Court that ruled that Marcy's Law was unconstitutional and validated our referendum votes from that 2019 election. Obviously, that case is going to get further down the line and hit the Supreme Court here. But that case did start in the Commonwealth Court, and it should be noted, that the Commonwealth Court right now has a very Republican leaning. It's 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats currently sitting on that bench. So again, this election is not going to change the makeup of this court, but we know that this is where Supreme Court justices come from. This is where federal judges could come from. So it's really important that we honor the importance of the Commonwealth Court, being that it is Pennsylvania uniquely, and make sure that we make the right decisions here. We have 2 judges to elect. So when you get your ballot, when you see your ballot for the first time tomorrow, hopefully it's not the first time you see your ballot. Hopefully you've already downloaded what your ballot will look like for where you live, and so that you can make the decisions that you need to make, because you get to elect 2 judges for the Commonwealth Court. So there's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans running for these seats. And so it's just really important that you take your time and vote your values for this one as well.
And I'll say just, for the candidates that you've got to choose from there, there's Drew Crompton, who we mentioned, former Senate staffer running as a Republican. There's also Stacey Wallace. She's an attorney from Bradford County. She's in private practice. On the Democratic side, there's Laura Dumas. She's on the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. And then David Spurgeon, Allegheny County area. He's on the Common Pleas Court there too. Just a note, actually, usually the Bar Association ratings are a pretty good assessment of how experienced a candidate is, that kind of thing. Spurgeon was the only one that got a highly recommended rating in that case. Crompton and Dumas both recommended from the association. Stacey Wallace was the only one who got a not recommended, and that was just because the Bar Association thought she didn't have enough experience to be a judge. It wasn't anything like nefarious or anything like that. Yeah, those are always great to check out if you want to get more information on any of the judges. The Bar Association also does Q&As with all of them. So if you're really interested in jurisprudence and how these judges think about the law, a lot of them do answer in some detail. It's pretty interesting, I think.
Thank you for that, Miracle.
Yes, sticking with you, Katie, and then Khadija, and then Stephen. You're talking about a lot of these retention votes as well. So can you talk about what that is? We tried to put out a little tweet about it, but can you talk about retention votes, why they're important, and how what that impacts, and what a no vote means, and what a yes vote means?
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, a retention is a yes or no vote. So on your ballot, depending on where you live, you will see the option to either retain, to keep, or to reject a lot of the judges that are in your area. I would urge you to, check out some of the decisions that they've made. Sometimes the Bar Association will explicitly say, like, probably don't retain this judge because they've done something wrong. But usually, I mean, retention is almost a sure thing for most judges, unless they've committed a crime. So in 2015, we saw some judges that weren't retained because there was a thing called Porngate that happened on the Supreme Court level. It is too complicated to get into the whole thing, but if you Google, just Google what you think is the best thing to Google. That was the thing that was usually called. Yeah, Porngate happened in the 2015-ish times. The couple judges left after that. That's actually why we have such big Democratic majorities on the Supreme Court right now. But yeah, retention, big deal. Often judges are retained. They don't have to be. If there's a judge that you think has made a decision that you don't like, feel free. Say you do not want to maintain them.
And I'll jump in here with retention votes because a lot of people don't understand it. When you're going to get your ballot tomorrow, especially if you're looking at it for the first time, which I'm going to encourage you not to do that tomorrow. Go into the polls informed of what you're going to do, not to hold up those lines. We get everybody there processed. But it's really important to know that retention votes, it's going to be a yes or no. You're going to see this person's name, this judge's name, and a yes and no next to them. You're not going to see a D, an R, a G, or an I following their name because these are nonpartisan retention elections, right? They're not running up against another candidate. They're just running up against you as the constituent to say yes or no to retain them. It's also important to know that, as Katie mentioned, it's really difficult to not retain a judge. You'd have to actually run a campaign to not have a judge be retained. It's just common nature for us as the electorate to not say no to something we don't know what we're saying no to. And a lot of times folks won't even vote for this at all because they don't know what they're saying yes or no to. So it's really important to keep that in mind as you go to the polls. Retention votes, again, as Katie mentioned earlier in this broadcast, is that 10-year term, it's a long time. And as they're going to continue to be retained, these are folks who will sit on the bench 10, 20, 30 years. So it's really important to make an informed decision. I know me personally, 2 years ago when I cast my ballot, I wasn't sure. I was right before I went to go vote, I looked up my ballot to see who were the judges up for retention voting. And then what I did is I Googled the judges. And the top 3 things pop up on Google, right? The logarithm pops up and you kind of find out where these judges stand on an issue, if they've made some kind of nefarious comment, etc. And I came to an understanding when I cast my ballot that a judge that was up for retention in Dauphin County had made some very disparaging remarks against Colin Kaepernick. And it was just my personal decision that I couldn't continue to allow someone to sit on the bench who felt that way, that would potentially disperse justice on me or people who look like me. You think about Meek Mill. Stephen mentioned Meek Mill earlier. Well, these judges are up for retention. Do you continue to keep a judge on a bench that is making your life very difficult after you've already served your sentence? So it's all up to us to kind of do our homework, Google these folks and find out where they stand on some of the issues and some of the cases that they've ruled on to make your decisions.
I have nothing I think I can add. I think Katie and Khadija summarized it very well. Just do some research, Google it. I wish I had a retention guide for you guys, but alas, my apologies. I couldn't get something together.
I can add one thing though. The retention votes that you're going to see for the statewide retention votes are a lot of folks on the Commonwealth Court, because obviously 10 years ago we put a lot of folks on the Commonwealth Court, which is why we have a 10-year retention vote now here in 2021, and all 5 up for retention were all elected as Republicans.
And one quick drop before we go back to Miracle, we do have in the comment section a link to our online voter guide, and it's anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania. You put your address in, it will pull up your ballot, so you'll get to see not only the judges running for retention statewide, but in your local community, on the Court of Common Pleas, in all the judicial districts. There'll be potentially judges running at the county level or at the multi-county level, depending on the size of your judicial district. So you'll get all types of information. You could do the research and learn about them all night as you stay up, so excited to get ready to, get your voice heard and do your democratic duty.
You're like
Democratic
outfit, ready. But I know we mentioned earlier about the money, and we've seen a lot of money actually pour into a lot of these school board races. We've unfortunately seen, this critical race theory hysteria. And to tie this all in together, we know there's going to be a lot of cases that are going to be filed about this and argued about this in the coming years. So starting with you, Khadija, can you just talk about some of the important school board races that you're seeing as you travel across, the Commonwealth, and what has been your impression about how that's galvanizing and mobilizing a certain base?
So you're absolutely correct. It is galvanizing a certain base. And what we're seeing, I currently live in Chester County. I just recently moved from Dauphin County to Chester County. I live in a different East Town. We have folks who are my neighbors who have created their own yard signs saying no to critical race theory. Those of us who are educated understand that critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 schools. But there is the hysteria around this critical race theory and the thought that we are indoctrinating children to have them think a certain way. And so, this is exactly what it is. There has to be an answer to this. Otherwise, you allow those to continue to perpetuate lies around what it is critical race theory is and who is being taught critical race theory. But, conversations we were having earlier, it just leads us to the fact that folks who are currently going to be elected to school board will one day be elected to state representative and one day be elected to U.S. senators. And so this is, as Stephen mentioned earlier, this is the farming house for political candidates of the future. And so we can't allow those who perpetuate the lies to be elected into these critical positions to miseducate our children and then potentially run for higher office at a later point. Lots of money being thrown into these school board races. Again, hundreds of thousands of dollars for school board. These are positions for the most part that are not paid positions. And so the fact that we're spending so much money to keep something out of schools that's not already in schools and is not in schools is just, it's ludicrous.
And Stephen, I know you've been doing some reporting on money and investments into these candidate positions. Are you also seeing some of the critical race theory school board money overlap in some of these districts?
Well, I haven't done too much cover of that, but just really quick, what I could say is critical race theory is definitely motivating a lot of people. I mean, it's even showed up in the legislature. I've covered a push in Harrisburg to try and advance a bill that no one will come out and say is about critical race theory, but if you just go look at the sponsor's old Facebook post, I think is very clearly about the idea that there is radicalization, there is indoctrination happening in schools. So Pennsylvania has, like I said, unlimited campaign finance disclosures. You can spend as much money as you want on politics. People with an agenda have always utilized that. They've utilized that for years. This year is no different. And, if you just look around a lot, there has been national efforts from the likes of Steve Bannon, from other Republican activists to channel the Trump's base, very conservative, very nationalist elements of American politics into school boards into local races. And I think, Katie could talk about her reporting, but, and that's overlap with COVID, and like, it's all created this really, a really strong conservative interest in winning these seats. It's kind of, at this point, outside of going to vote, it's too late to knock doors necessarily. Maybe Kadita would disagree, but we're going to we're kind of just going to see tomorrow like how much has all these efforts from the conservative base to say vote for school board, vote for township commissioner, yada yada work. And I'll be kind of trying to look for that tomorrow.
Yeah, I can say a little bit more about the campaign finance aspect, because one of the things that we saw in school boards this year that was unusual was a lot of spending from one person. So there was this, and this has been covered for a little while. We put up a story today looking at the spending of a guy named Paul Martino. He's a venture capitalist from Bucks County. He's got kids in the Bucks County, Bucks Central School District. And basically, he says, like many parents, he was very frustrated with schools being closed for a long time during COVID, and decided to massively spend on school board races in order to make sure that schools stayed open and didn't close down because of COVID again. Now, I should say, schools across Pennsylvania, they're open right now. They're not closed. And what ended up happening, so Martino, he put in around $560,000 of his own money into about 55 different school board races across the state. So that's a massive amount of money for one person and a massive amount of influence. And again, totally legal under Pennsylvania's campaign finance laws. What he did was unusual. He put it into 55 or so different PACs that were operating on the local level. And so he didn't vet individual candidates. He vetted people who were willing to run PACs in many, many different school board races, gave them the money. And he says, this is an effort that is totally focused on keeping schools open. But these are really contentious races, and people have things that they care about beyond keeping schools open. So what we saw looking at race after race after race was that these were getting very contentious, and people were very focused on critical race theory. They were very focused on masking in schools and vaccines and issues that, again, kind of speak more to like national culture wars than they actually spoke to anything that was happening in these individual districts. So, you put a lot of money onto something that's already smoldering, and sometimes the money catches fire a little bit. So you did start to see very slick ads that were disseminated very widely on social media that were denouncing school board members as like Marxists and things like that. And they got pretty tense, these races. So the long and short of it is Martino claimed this was a very bipartisan effort that he was giving to anybody who would support keeping schools open. A lot of Democrats say, I also don't want to close schools. Kids had learning loss. I don't want to do it. But what we found was that almost every single time they were giving to Republican candidates. And so, they would argue that's just because they felt that those candidates more aligned with their mission. But what we did, because they claimed that they gave about a third of the money to Democrats and a third or 2/3 went to Republicans, somewhere around there. You couldn't figure this out in every single race, but we looked and isolated 43 different PACs that made their fundraising pretty public. So that was 156 different candidates that all got money from this guy. 133 of them were Republicans. A couple were unaffiliated libertarians, but only 10 were Democrats. So that kind of shows you the partisanship of this spending. And again, this is a lot of money to be putting into a school board race. Other groups tried to match it. You saw local Democratic committees spending a good amount on races. You saw Republicans spending a good amount on races. Our friend Jeff Yass, the school choice billionaire, richest man in Pennsylvania, he put a bunch of money into some of these PACs. So he bolstered the spending that Paul Martino was already doing. And so, yeah, you just saw an insane amount of money in school board races this year from all over the place, primarily one man. So that's a long answer, but that's kind of the contours of what we're looking at here.
Thank you so much for that. Staying local, first started with Stephen, because I have a specific question about a story you just did about some text message shenanigans. But is there other, local races that you're paying attention to? But starting with Stephen and the mayor's race in Harrisburg, where we have Wanda Williams, potentially going to take the mayor's office from the incumbent Eric Pappenfuse. Tell us a little bit about that race, but then more specifically about this recent twist in the campaign. And it's funny because me being in Pittsburgh, spending a lot of time in Harrisburg, the mayoral politics of Harrisburg, going back to Mayor Reed, have always been just so interesting. It's worthy of its own sitcom or something like that. But just tell a little bit about the mayor's race and this text message fiasco that went on recently.
Yeah, sure. So Mayor Eric Pappenfuse has been mayor for about 2 terms. He lost his primary in May by 40 votes, not by a lot. It was a split 5-way race, and that alone I could talk about probably for 5 minutes. But suffice to say, he decided to run a write-in campaign to try and keep his office. Basically, imagine if Bill Peduto was like, I'm gonna have a write-in campaign to stay in office, which I'm sure Pittsburgh would love. But Wanda Williams, a Black woman, she's the city council president. She beat Pappenfuse, and so she's the Democratic nominee. There's also a Republican in the race, but because Pappenfuse is deciding to stick in with this write-in campaign, it means that we have a 3-way race that's pretty competitive. And people have been getting. There's been a lot of voter contact. I've seen the mayor out door knocking quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. And the Wanda flyers are popping up on doors. Mailboxes are full. But what was interesting is in the last week or two, people have started getting these text messages that are purportedly from the Wanda Williams campaign. At which point, a volunteer asked them for their opinion. And what my reporting has shown, in fact, and I myself, I do vote as a reporter. I even just asked a question about. I'm undecided, kind of like who would you say I should vote for? Why should I vote for Wanda? And the person then encouraged me not to vote if my mind wasn't made up, which is very odd in voter contact. As anyone who's worked a campaign, and I talked to someone, and it's just extremely weird for anyone to ever tell a voter who is not telling you a firm answer that, oh, you don't vote. That's kind of politics 101 is you'd always try to convince people to go vote. And it takes a rare person who's going to actively tell people not to vote. And we're maybe seeing more of that these days. But the main point is when you look at campaign finance filings, you can't find any money in the Wanda Williams campaign that indicates that she's using text banking. There would be a trail on that. There would be expenses. You'd be paying for a service. You'd be paying for something. There is a lot of money in the Pappenfuse campaign that he spent on text messages and phone calls. And I've gotten calls from the Pappenfuse campaign as well. The Pappenfuse campaign says they're not running these text messaging. It's not some Nixonian dirty trick. I've talked to people who have gotten texts who say they're voting for Wanda just straight up, and then they were given access to information. It's just very odd overall. And I think what it just points to is when you have all this money getting spent on races, this could be someone who wants to discourage Wanda voters. This could be someone who has just never been coached in how to talk to voters. There's no reason to assume it's the most negative thing that it could be, but it's just same thing. I look through all of the county's campaign finance reports. I can't figure out who spent the money on this. And I think that is the thing that I'm most troubled by as a reporter who wants government to work. It's someone spending money to influence the process, and I can't figure out who they are. And that's that to me, top of the list of concerns for democracy.
Single issue voter. He just wants to understand where the money's going.
That's awesome. Katie, what are some of the local races that you're following in the greater Philadelphia area?
Greater Philadelphia area. Well, we've got one big race in the city, and that is for DA. It is not very competitive. So Larry Krasner, our progressive DA, he's kind of a controversial figure just because he changed a lot of things in the office when he came in. There was a real question of how the primary would go for Krasner back in May. He was up against Carlos Vega, who he had actually fired from the DA's office when he took office. And it was a referendum, too, on just, how Krasner has dealt with gun violence. Philly's seen historic rises in gun violence due to the pandemic. It's not the only happening in this city. It's happening around the country in big cities. But, again, when you're a progressive prosecutor who comes in with the goal of being anti-mass incarceration, of diverting people out of jail into programs that, again, do not incarcerate you for things like gun possession, people were wondering what the referendum was going to be on Krasner. It was a decisive victory in the primary. It wasn't that close. And it is very unlikely that he's going to lose in the general election. His opponent is this guy, Chuck Peruto. He is I would say, a colorful character in Philly. He's a longtime defense attorney. I've spent time with both of them. Peruto is very old school. He basically told me he's got a very black and white view of justice. He thinks, there are bad people and there are good people, and we have to protect the good people from the bad people, and that's that. And he is in favor of more aggressive prosecution and incarceration policies. Krasner says he's going to stay the course. He is not worried about the election. He made a bunch of jokes about how he was so nervous when I talked to him. But, I think, again, this is another question of, does Philadelphia like the direction it's on in terms of criminal justice? It's a very new direction. It's a direction more cities have started to take. And I think the answer so far appears to be yes, but we will know for sure tomorrow. Or maybe after tomorrow. I don't know. Some close races. This race probably won't be close, so I think we will know. But I should just say, in general, if there are close races, say for the appellate court races, we might not know even for a couple of days. We got a missive from the Department of State today saying they're hoping to get all of the ballots counted within a few days, so 2 or 3 maybe. So if the race is really close, it might be a minute.
And then I'm just looking at some of these races that I see on a sample ballot here. I pulled the sample ballot from Monroeville, where I was born, right? And I wanted to see what was going on in Monroeville. And obviously, Allegheny County has an opportunity to elect 10 judges for the common pleas courts. So we're talking about the lower courts now. That will eventually, these lower courts then go up into the appellate court level. So very important races there. But what I'm noticing in a lot of ballots across the state, right, because we're doing this work in Bucks County and Cumberland and Dauphin, is that there are so many races in which no one is running for the office at all. I'm looking at right now, judge of elections, inspector of elections, constables. If you can get 5 of your friends to write you in, you could become the judge of election where you live. So very important that, and these are positions, some of these that are paid positions that no one is running for at all. So this is an opportunity for you. If you're someone who wants to take another, a bigger role in this democracy, you can actually encourage your friends to write you in for judge of election or inspectors of election, important positions in which no one seems to want to run for the office.
That's a fantastic point. That's a great point. Thank you for that. Miracle, do you have a follow-up?
I did. I wanted to also talk about looking past Tuesday. What are some of the next steps? Because a lot of these candidates are actually holding office now. And we also, of course, have, the governor's race, the Senate race, and to talk about a little bit some breaking news that broke earlier today. But what are the next steps if everyone who was running tomorrow who already holds a seat in office? Can you talk about that? And then Khadija, I know you have to leave. Can you also talk about this redistricting process and how that is going to impact all of these candidates and some of the people who are voting for tomorrow? So Khadija, I'll start with you and then I'll move to Katie and Stephen.
Sure. So obviously, these off-year elections, quotation marks here, off-year elections here, these elections that end in odd years, don't seem to get the attention that other elections will receive, the federal elections that we'll have in 2022 and the big presidential election in 2024. So as we're looking forward to what's happening next, let's not stop with what's happening tomorrow. Let's all of us come out and cast our ballots tomorrow. Let's make sure that we understand how important the courts are to our daily lives, school boards, constables, DAs, commissioners, all these things matter. And so let's make sure we're coming out to cast ballots tomorrow before 8 o'clock. As long as you're in the line, you can still cast your ballot tomorrow. And this is, we're thinking ahead up to 2022 and knowing that we're going to have very important gubernatorial race here in Pennsylvania. The governor's residence decides who is our Secretary of State currently. That's still how we do that here in Pennsylvania, although there is proposed legislation to change the way in which We have our Secretary of State in position here. We think about the senatorial race, and that there's going to be lots of attention and eyes on Pennsylvania, as many call Senator Toomey's vacant seat, soon to be vacant seat, one of the most flippable in the country. And we think about all the other, the fact that you just talked about redistricting, and we have these congressional maps coming due. We know that we're going to lose a congressperson. Currently, we have 18, evenly split, 9 Republicans, 9 Democrats, which is going to go down to 17 due to our census results and the fact that population has declined here in the Commonwealth. So we'll now have 17 Congress folks that go to DC on our behalf here in the Commonwealth. And so we have those important races happening as well. And we think about redistricting, right? So this, for those who are out there and like, what are we talking about? Redistricting, there's 2 types, right? So we have legislative redistricting, which will be the maps of those who sit in Harrisburg. And then we have congressional redistricting for those who will sit in DC on our behalf here in Pennsylvania. And there's two various ways in which they'll draw maps, right? So we have legislators drawing maps for congressional, and then we have a commission that will do it for the legislative. And so, this opportunities that we can have gerrymandering take place, which none of us want to see, because we know that gerrymandering is bad no matter who does it and how they do it. There's also, we hope that in the next, I think it's now down to like 83 days, that we do have a map that can be reviewed and approved so that we can have a May primary in 2022 on time. And then folks who want to run for office will know this information by January, so they can decide whether or not they want to run for the seat and whatever this new district will look like for them. So these things are very important that for us to pay attention to. We're not North Carolina, we're not Texas, we're not having the outrageous gerrymandering situations they're having there in those states. But, we looked at the 2011 congressional map here that we had in the Commonwealth, which the Supreme Court ruled is unconstitutional, right? Courts matter, and had to redraw those maps for us in that last election. So we want to make sure that we have maps that make sense. We want to make sure that that they are equitable. We want to make sure that they're representative of the demographics. And we want to make sure that we're protecting the power of constituents of color who seem to lose out a lot of times when maps are redrawn.
For that. And I know we talked a little bit to the Senate race. I know, Katie, today there was some breaking news within the Senate race with one of the proposed candidates, Parnell. Give a general trigger warning, but being as sensitive as possible, can you just talk a little bit about that story and why that is breaking news today?
Sure. So I should say, I haven't really been covering this closely. The Philadelphia Inquirer is the organization that wrote this story. I just read it. But Parnell is running for Senate. He unsuccessfully ran for Congress a year ago now. And he has been very, very closely allied with Donald Trump. Donald Trump gave a very early endorsement of Parnell, which was useful to him in the GOP field because a lot of the candidates have been trying to ally themselves with Trump, and he's the one who did it successfully. Parnell right now is in the process of a really sort of contentious divorce hearing, a series of hearings, and his now estranged wife spoke today in trial. The Inquirer has been covering it. Parnell has not gotten a chance to take the stand yet. So again, this is still a trial that is in process, but she made some pretty significant allegations of domestic violence and just a bunch of other things in their marriage. So, if anybody is interested in that, that is going to come up. I can guarantee it a lot in this race for as long as Sean Parnell is in it. That's going to be a significant factor here. Again, on the race, because again, there's still a lot we probably still don't know about this whole situation. But on the race, the other GOP frontrunner at this point looks like Jeff Bartos, who previously ran for lieutenant governor unsuccessfully in Pennsylvania alongside Scott Wagner in 2018. Bartos is seen as a more moderate-ish candidate, but he also has tried to ally himself with Trump. I think it doesn't fit him quite as well as it does with Parnell, just because Bartos is a slightly different kind of politician. He's a real estate developer. That's primarily what he does, but he's also been a GOP fundraiser for many years. He's well connected in the party, and that's really why you see him running right now. it is early in this race. It doesn't feel early because it's already been going for a while, but we still have a full year until this race, actually this election happens. So a lot could happen. But again, the reminder is on the Democratic side, we've got John Fetterman, we've got Connor Lamb, we've got Malcolm Kenyatta. Those are just three of them. There are a lot more on both sides of the aisle. So this is going to be I think a nutty race. That seems, I think that's fair, right, Stephen?
Yeah. And I'm covering the other nutty race more, which is the governor's race. So far for Democrats, it's just Josh Shapiro. For Republicans, it is at least a dozen people. Could get bigger. Without running them all down, the main thing I'll say is for Democrats, if you're a Democrat, Josh Shapiro so far is like the only person who's thrown his hat in. There's some rumblings about recruiting one Philadelphia progressive named Chris Rabb. He's a state rep, but we'll see what happens there. And then another thing to look forward to, especially for Pittsburgh. So, Ed Gainey is, he's on the ballot tomorrow. He will probably, knock on wood, win unless something crazy happens. When that happens, there's going to have to be a special election to replace him in Harrisburg. I think there's scuttlebutt about other members of the Allegheny County delegation being brought in on staff for him. If they get picked, there's going to be special elections there. So if you're interested in trying to get involved in state politics, knowing more about state politics in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, when there are special elections to replace these people, talk to candidates, figure people out, because you're going to have to kind of be called to vote again, like probably relatively soon. That's definitely something for Pittsburgh to keep an eye on, I would say.
Yeah, and to sticking with you, Stephen, can you just talk about the projected cost of the next election cycle in Pennsylvania? Because I've seen like different numbers put out, but can you just talk about one of the most expensive election cycles like in U.S. history, just within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? So can you just,
Oh my. All right. So there is a person in Harrisburg, a media figure, who likes to come up to me and ask me, "Hey, Steve, what do you think of that? I think his running bet is $1 billion. I don't know if I'm willing to go that high. That is an insane amount of money. Also, though, it's really hard to keep track because there's a million ways to spend it. We can't keep track of it. Look, I could easily see 60, 70 million spent on the governor's race, and that's just through the campaign committees. I could easily see 100, 150 million spent on the Senate race. I could see, maybe 30, 40, 50 million on the legislative races. What are we at right now? 250, 300 million? And like, that's just all the money I'm talking about there is money that I could track easily through like the public filings. Millions more are spent in ways, like I said, that are hard to track. They go through nonprofits, the different sort of IRS groups. I don't think it's crazy to put this at the $200, $300, $400 million spent on politics in Pennsylvania. And, I would be probably, if someone was going to bet me higher, I would be like, yeah, keep hitting me. That's fine. I'm willing to go higher on this. Like, and it's kind of crazy. Our campaign finance laws are a little broken, and you should still vote because that's like the only thing you have. If there's anyone watching with billions of dollars, like, you could spend it if you want, but if not, vote. Because if everyone else is going to spend money, but you have a vote at least, and that's powerful too.
I just hear those dollar amounts and I think about how we could better spend that money here in the Commonwealth. So we definitely have a call to reform finance of these campaigns. It's outrageous. While we still have people who are being evicted from homes, and we have shelters and folks needing food banks to put food on the tables in their households, we spend a lot of money on elections. We can do better here in the Commonwealth.
I'll just to contextualize for folks who are having a hard time wrapping their brains around like the amount of money that's happening here. So again, as we've said, we are a year out from this election. The highest fundraiser so far in just the Senate race has been John Fetterman, who announced pretty early. He has raised, this is just him, it's probably over 10 now, but over $9 million has been reported in his campaign filings so far. That's actually the 12th most of any Senate candidate in the country.
Wow.
And it's actually like, and Fetterman will point to this, that's mostly in small dollar donations. And a lot of it's from inside the state, from just the individual people. Other people have raised a lot more with like big political action committee money, PACs and super PACs. And so again, that is one data point. That is one candidate a year, more than a year out from the election is when he reported that money. So just again, to contextualize, it's going to be really expensive.
Wow, that's fascinating. And before we go, we have a tradition here on the show where we started by Miracle. I got to give Miracle. We call it the Miracle question, just to kind of lighten things up, because we get pretty heavy and talk about some pretty heavy issues. So I know Khadija, you got to run. So we'll start with you. Thank you for staying on. You got a call. We'll go Khadija, Katie, then Stephen. But really early when we started this podcast during the pandemic, Miracle started to ask this question at the end, and the question is, what brings you joy? And we found that by asking this question, it kind of always ends things, on a positive, and it kind of humanizes our guests. So folks that not only just look at you as activists, advocates, politicians, reporters, but also regular people. So, for tonight's edition of the Miracle Question, what brings you joy? Starting with Khadija, what brings you joy?
As I've been traveling the state and trying to get folks who have been functionally and politically disenfranchised, what brings me joy is talking to the young folks out here, 14, 15, 16-year-olds who are really invested in what's happening right now, not only here in the Commonwealth, but across the country. And whenever I'm having a down moment and wanting to throw my hands up in despair, I'll go and I'll do a panel discussion with 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds, because they have the pulse on what is really real and what we need to invest in here in this country, and what we need to do to make sure that we're able to leave behind a future for them to excel. And so what brings me joy is spending time with the youth, because they get it, and they bring me joy. That's that simple. When I'm feeling down, I go spend time with the 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They get it.
Am I next? I will say this is going to be, I think, a less meaningful answer maybe than Khadijah's, but I was just going to I like going for a nice walk. That brings me joy. It's been really nice out in Philly lately. Walking around yesterday, there were a lot of little kids trick-or-treating. It's been just very cute. I love, this is a good city of communities. Big fan of Philadelphia. Big fan of Pittsburgh too. Don't get me wrong. You guys are great out there. Yeah, a nice walk in the neighborhood when it's nice out. That brings me a lot of joy.
I'm a big fan of Philly as well, so no need to apologize for liking Philly. Philly's cool.
And Stephen, I should say too, I lived in Harrisburg alongside Stephen, literally next door to where he lives now. I love Harrisburg too.
I will just jump in with, I went to Pitt, so Pittsburgh is greater than Philly, though Philly's great and all. Anyway, though, no, the joy.
Did you vote? Hold on. Did you vote in the poll though?
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had to take my one opportunity to get off on Philly. Like, absolutely. I'm going to be a cornball. As I was coming up to record, beautiful sunset. Like, I feel like I haven't seen one that good. It was like just pink and red. I looked and I literally stopped and stared at it for a good 2 minutes and just tried to take a deep breath. And then I came in and recorded this. So that brought me a good bit of joy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Khadija Kenner from the New Pennsylvania Project, Katie Meyer from WHYY, and Stephen Caruso from the PA Capital Star. Thank you so much for a very enlightening discussion. Looking forward to continuing this, and maybe some point between now and the new year, we could do a recap and a preview of the circus that is going to be 2022. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
This was great. Thank you, One Hood.
Thank you. Yes, and again, Khadija Kenner, Katie Meyer, and Stephen Caruso, thank you so much for joining us. That was a fantastic conversation, and Miracle, I think we need to continue, to do the statewide stuff. Yeah. I think it's a lot of great information for folks in the Southwest, but continuing to make those connections, particularly as we go into a year, where the statewide races and state government is going to take a much center role, in politics, as we go into the midterms.
Yeah, there's going to be so many more races, so much to look forward to. So if you are a political nerd, someone who's just like very into civic engagement, trust me, Pennsylvania is going to be the place for you for at least the next 4 years. There's so much happening. We have city council, county council, mayors, county executive, district attorneys, a lot of races that we didn't even get to talk to about, a lot of the row races. So there's a lot of stuff happening. But as a reminder, all of this only matters if you show up tomorrow. And every election, basically, we start to tell people every 6 months, get used to voting every 6 months, and sometimes even sooner than that. We talk about the special elections, the runoff elections, if we don't have decided winners. There's a lot of things that we have to be mindful of. In addition, if you are a person who is voting by mail, please go and check your mailbox. If you had a ballot that had issues, some of the ballots did not have the correct barcodes, you may have received a new ballot. Please go in and check your mailbox. I myself came home recently and I was like, why do I have this mail-in ballot? I've already voted. I had one of the tainted mail-in ballots. So please make sure you go and check your mailbox. Please make sure you have a voter plan, and just be safe tomorrow. Luckily, I think the weather has changed. It's no longer supposed to rain. So please make sure you're out here voting. Bring a friend, bring a family member, go and vote. It takes less than 5 minutes to fill out your ballot. Do it the front and back page, and join us tomorrow evening. I guess, are we announcing that we're going to be live around town tomorrow evening?
Yeah,
Hopefully,
yeah. Look for the announcement sometime tomorrow. Well, we will be on what Black Pittsburgh needs to know at 2 p.m. With Morgan Overton. So that's something that we could promote with certainty, that tomorrow at 2 p.m. Myself, Miracle, and Morgan Overton from the Young Democrats of Allegheny County will be the guests on what Black Pittsburgh needs to know.
Yes, talking all things election. So if you enjoyed tonight and you want to learn more, join us tomorrow at 2:00. Before or after you vote, we're going to have some really good information and so talk about where you can go and watch the election results tomorrow evening.
Yep. And one other thing that I'll add before we go, we did put in the comments section the link to the state's ballot tracker link. You can go on there, and if you voted by mail, you can check and see where your ballot is in the system, if it's been accepted and counted already, or where it is in the system. So you can do that right now tonight. If you voted, we just sent out a gang of text messages over the past weekend, and there was a lot of people who already voted, and we sent them the link, and they were able to text us back and say, yeah, I just checked. My vote has been counted. So you don't have any anxiety, or don't have to have any worry about the status of your ballot. Check that tonight, because if it hasn't been counted yet, you may want to, show up at your polling place and void it, and then vote in person. But you would have to void, the mail ballot, and it's a little bit of a process. So hopefully you don't have to do that. Hopefully when you go on and check the tracker, it will check and say vote has been counted. It got into the Board of Elections. But if not, you may have to make a couple steps tomorrow just to make sure that your vote got counted. But I just did want to give a shout out to that. And one last shout out to One Hood Media, and as well as the One Hood Power. We have separate online voter guides. We have the link to the One Hood Power online voter guide that you can go on and see every single race. Check out the sample ballot like Khadija was talking about, as well as make a plan where it will send you a text message during the day to remind you to go vote. I did it at 7 a.m. I'm going to get a text message from the One Hood Power online voter guide reminding me that I need to go vote, because I said at 7 a.m. I'm going to go vote. We're going to go vote with my family before we take the kids to school. As many people know, my wife is running for the Court of Common Pleas judge, so we're going to go as a family and vote. and drop the kids off to school. So whatever you do, make your plan. If you haven't voted already, you have until 8 p.m. tomorrow. The polls open at 7 a.m., but make sure you get your voice heard. And you can always, check out our Facebook page or check out our website. Go to resources where it says 1 HP ballot ready. You'll go on there, and even tomorrow you can go on and check it out. You could be at work. Hey, if you're going to go vote after work, during your lunch break or a downtime at work, you can jump on the website, check it out. You can even pick all your different choices. And then you go in and be like, hey, what were my choices? And it will show you what all your choices are. So you don't even have to remember who you voted for as you've done your research. So definitely take advantage of that tool. It's something, we're really proud of. And just remember to get your voice heard. And again, I want to thank Khadijah, Stephen, and Katie for joining us for a really, really great episode tonight. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Miracle, to close us out.
Yes, I'll say wishing everybody a happy election day. Also remind people, if you do get texts, just ask people to either unsubscribe or just calmly engage the person who's texting. There's usually a person sending these text messages out. So just remember to be kind, be graceful and courteous. Give yourself grace. It's still a global pandemic. Also, if you are you have a student, please make sure you check in with your student, check your phone, email. Some schools are closed tomorrow. They're doing remote learning because there are election sites. So please, please, please make sure you've checked in to make sure you have childcare or an arrangement to make sure your children are going to be okay, because a lot of schools are going to be closing tomorrow because people are going to be coming campaigning and voting. So yeah, with that, turn back to Kahari so we can wrap up and close.
Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of the One Hood Power Hour. Join us next Monday as we recap. We haven't figured out who the guests are going to be or anything like that, so look for that later in the week. But we will recap tomorrow's election. So look forward to for another great conversation, and also check us out on One Hood Media's Facebook page at 2 p.m. tomorrow as special guests on what Black Pittsburgh needs to know. So on behalf of Miracle Jones, my co-host, again, thank you to Khadijah Kenner, Stephen Caruso, and Katie Meyer for joining us tonight. This has been the One Hood Power Hour. We will see you next Monday at 7. Everyone, have a great night. And please, if you haven't yet, get out to vote tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Polls will be open in the state of Pennsylvania. Thank you. Have a great night.